Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm trying to do today is to recreate a lecture that I delivered on the 23rd of June, 2006. The topic of discussion was that the role of Gadangme traditional leadership hinders progress. My name is Adesoya. At the time I recorded this, I was chairman of Gadangme Nikasim Wasabu. I took the view that I should record this for posterity since the old recording was on a different material that has not endured. Okay. My view is that traditional leadership, especially as we have it in Accra, hinders progress. And I'll go through the reasons why I've made this very bold statement. It generally has to do with the way the Ghana people are organized, and it has to be with the deep urbanization that is taking place in Accra. It also has to do with our system of government within the Ghana states and how that has run into conflict with other issues that have come back. Please bear with me. My heart is really in the right place. And what I'm doing is not just writing of traditional leadership, but hoping, desperately hoping, that it will be reformed so that the pride that was associated in the past with some traditional leaders will come up to us. Okay. Now, at the time I recorded this, King Takitayo III had just been installed. Indeed, he was installed, I think, on the 10th of June. So I had to make certain disclaimers. I'm not one of what one would call a chieftaincy eater. I'm not involved in the little houses that decide who is leader or king of the Ghana people. I come at this as somebody who rightly born and bred in Accra and who considers myself to be a Ghana person. So please, again, bear with me. This is not about one faction or another. Essentially, this is meant to be a debate. So it really has no reflection on what is going on in the Ghana state at present. Although maybe if I go through the various processes, one would see how we can draw some solace from the fact that what is going is quite normal within the Ghana state. Okay. At present moment, we are still fighting in the airways. We are fighting in the courts. We are fighting with press conferences. We are fighting with various newspapers. And really, what we're fighting for is about installing a king in essentially what I call Gamashi. It normally should be done in a small house or a series of houses somewhere. But because those families have not been able to come to any agreement, we commoners or we secular folk now need to be involved. And we're passing a lot of commentary. Some of it is outlandish. Some of it it's pertinent to what is happening. And really, what some of us hope is that we have a new king who is able to lead us to progress and would wish him well. But as someone who is not really into chieftaincy, I think that this is more about wishes, but it's also pertinent to look at 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 4 to 22, that talks about what a king does for people. Gadangme is a geographical area. Ga is a language, but it's also about identity. The whole Gadangme base relates to various villages and hamlets which have been set up around who owe allegiance to various mother states. Okay, I'll go into that detail later on. But we have traditional leadership, which is based on historical, customary, and it's really force of habit. And what they can maintain is that their traditional leadership is patrilineal, and there's a form of dynasty because although it's not transferred from parent to son, all of them have to come from one house. Okay. I like to define progress as moving towards a desirable objective. So what is that desirable objective? That's, for me, is at the back of this discussion. And that development is more about sustainable growth, which is based on equity and must bring about an improvement in the quality of life of people. The role of our traditional leaders is not written down. It's been based on tradition. Some say it cannot be challenged. Some say it's flexible, since it's meant to protect our subjects. And some say that whilst it's related to war, in peacetime, it can be extended to include almost anything. My question is that if this role is not defined, how does it cope with issues around modernity? How did it cope under colonization? And what was the relationship between the crown and the chiefs that we had in Ghana? My feeling is that the chiefs were used to implement indirect rule. So they became an instrument of the wider colonial government. They were given powers in certain areas, but they did not have powers in other areas. So they were given enough powers by the colonial government to allow them to have some legitimacy, but there were checks and balances that the colonial government exercised on them. Our chieftaincy tradition has not done very well under independence in the Republican state. Independence brought about urbanization and a drift to Gadangme land by all and sundry in the country. So, because the role has not been defined, it's been eroded. But not only has it been eroded, it's actually been made defective. Okay. Our Constitution talks about chapter 22, section 250, 270 to 277. It recognizes a chief, but it does not quite define their role. It deals mainly with the House of Chiefs at the national or regional level. But the chiefs are still an instrument of government. The power in our country is within the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And those roles that were performed by chiefs have been taken over by the state. So essentially, what we have is that we have a situation where the role of a chief is fairly nebulous. At best, it's ceremonial. That's throughout the country. But in an urbanized Gadangme, that was never a kingdom. The role has been totally diminished. And unless it is enhanced by some instruments, I believe that that role will fall into atrophy or will disappear. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because this chapter, which is in the Constitution, just really talks about the chiefs. It talks about the natural, the laws regarding the chiefs. It doesn't really say what a chief must do. It talks about saying that the act of making a chief is left to the people and the government cannot intervene in that. Okay? So whilst we talk about a chief, it doesn't really tell us who is a chief or how chiefs are made. Most of the world used to have rulers. They had traditional rulers, just like we have now. If we go deep into the Bible, we have the judges, the lords, the overlords, the chiefs, the kings. People were ruled by divine right, by accident of birth, or by brute force. But changes have crept in, and those changes have been dictated by mobility of work. People now work outside their locality. Work is no longer essentially agricultural or require lots of people that needs a chief to supervise them. Even family units and village units are no longer the basis of work. And we've had new forms of governmental organizations that have eclipsed the whole issue of monarchy. So if we look at France, Ireland, Germany, Italy, Austria, they all had kings. Now, we probably now have Britain and Denmark who are actually holding on to the remnants or the relics of what constitutional monarchy is about. But even in Britain, the king reigns or the queen reigns. The queen does not rule. When we go to South America, I think all the kings have been toppled. When we look at China, the various dynasties, they've all fallen into disuse. When we look at India, we no longer have the Rajis. When we look at Egypt, they are no longer pharaohs. When we look at Libya, and I can go on citing examples of traditional rulers whose role have been pushed aside. Even in our generation, I remember we had an emperor in Ethiopia. I think we have somebody in Uganda, Baganda, and it's changing. And the change is coming because there is a need for development. And in order to have that development, in order to have that accelerated development, we need to do something about that nebulous system of rule that I claim is at best ceremonial. Now, if you juxtapose the way the chiefs have ruled in the past, where they've been lords themselves, but they've had advisors, but they tend to take their decisions with their own council of state. What we've realized is that it's not helped us in terms of our wealth creation. If you look at what democracy has done for us, why do we think that different people in different parts of the world have looked to the Greeks to borrow a system of democracy? They've done that because people are governed when all of them are involved in that government. Democracy may not be the best, but if we look around the world, it's been the most enduring. People need to be purposeful to pursue their interests and those of the community. And democracy allows the two to be congruent. The state is giving permission and powers in certain areas of common good, like defense, external relations, etc. We vote for leaders because they show us what it is that they want to do for our people. They engage in debates about what it is that they can do. Now, when they have served their term, we choose new ones who can do better. Development is about protecting the poor and mobilizing them for growth. I don't think the system of chieftaincy helps. But then when you come to the Gadangwe situation, it's actually very difficult and very different because the Ga people of Ga people were never a kingdom. We had city-states who came together for purposes of war. So we have Ga, we have Osu, we have La, we have Teshi, we have Nungwa, we have Tema. All of them have their own chiefs. There's a Gamanche, and when there's war, the Gamanche assembles all of that to actually go and protect their interests. And what they do is they then bring in allies from Adan, from the other Dangwe states. They even go as far as Achim or Akwapim to get people. So we never had a kingdom where we had a king paramount, okay? Most of those chiefs that I talk about do not owe allegiance to the Gamanche because they are dealing with their own people, okay? Now, but the question then remains that were chiefs and kings really are leaders? Probably not at the start, because I'm told that at the start we had spiritual leaders, Ulome, and these Ulome actually could now no longer deal with our colonial masters, so we needed to have chiefs. And then even in our chieftaincy, we had to copy from other tribes and other nations. So if you look at the Gadangwe situation and the Gan situation, we don't have an absolute leader. There are different tasks. Abola presents us with Manche. Asre gives us an Akwashon. Bese gives us something. Malaysia Lata gives us something. Otublom gives us something. So you can actually see the pattern that I'm talking about, that there was no absolute monarch. If you then look at even at the names of the chiefs and the positions, you realize that Jaseche, Mankralo, and all those were all really borrowed. Now, we borrowed something for war. We try to maintain it in peacetime. It is something that has been eroded during peacetime. So we haven't been able to take advantage of development within the cast. If you ask me for comparison, I'll say that Egypt, India, Israel, China, United States, and all those people, their chiefs have gone. Even their spiritual leaders are nowhere to be found. What we are marching towards is development and new systems of government, because the old way of traditional authority has actually been pushed aside, whether we like it or not. There's better transparent systems that may work. And though we continue fighting to have this issue of a chief, really, I wonder what that chief will come and do for us. Because some traditional systems in the past have been challenged. When the role of the chiefs were challenged years ago, they had to draw up a Magna Carta, which was initiated to regulate the relationship between the crown and the lords and the people. We don't have any such instrument. That such instrument may be in the heads of people and may be in the minds of people, but it has never been spelled out so that we, the people, can also play a part. Okay. The major problem we've had in Ghana state. Chiefs may still hold sway in rural areas for matters of communication, for matters of motivation, where a chief actually comes in with their own role. But Katanga is no longer rural. It's the most urbanized area in Ghana. Everybody is come there. So either the traditional authorities have not assisted us, or they have actually conspired and acquiesced with the possession of our land. There wasn't much that they can do, because if people ask for land for development, you give it up. If people ask for land for people to come and live in, you give it up. But our politicians, corrupt as we think they are, excite more passion. In Gadangme, people follow politicians more than they follow chiefs. Our chiefs really haven't done anything for us in the past 70 years. They haven't built any hospitals or any schools or any houses or any position. I used to come and find a school, Kintakitayua Memorial, and really that's where it's ended. As some people say, they've actually abdicated their role to advocate for the people, and they've not been able to maintain that role of leading the people. And all they keep asking us all the time is that if we have chiefs, we must maintain them. Why should we maintain chiefs that do not add any value to what we are doing? Okay? I speak as a Republican, as somebody who believes that really politics is the way forward, not chieftaincy, not traditional authority by somebody who I have not voted for. And the question that I then ask is that, who rules Accra? It is who gets things done for the people of Accra. Who will rule Accra? It's the people who raise the taxes who rules Accra. It's the people who own the land. And in Accra, most of the lands are owned by the family. So they've sold a lot of them. And who protects our language? There have been complaints that the Ghana language is dying a very slow death. What have the chiefs done to protect our language? And as somebody says, even if you go to some of the houses of the chiefs, they are not speaking the Ghana language any longer. So I ask, who are the people? And who advocates for the people? And who fights for the people? And I'm saying that our chiefs have not done a good job at this present moment of doing that. Okay. So I'm always pushed. Do you want to abolish? Do you want to abandon our traditional leaders? My view is that if we can reform, then by all means, let's reform. But there might be too many changes. They would actually be too painful sometimes to reform. And the question that I ask is that, exactly what are we reforming? The erosion of their authority is gone on for too long. And really, that is why it's been so difficult for us to be able to have a chief. And that's why it's been very difficult to be able to have an effective chief since our independence, or rather since our republic. But we still have an opportunity to reform. And yet we are not doing it. We are washing all our dirty linen in public. No one seems to know the rules. People are quoting traditions that they cannot prove. It's all so oral. I think that it's probably now the best time to actually change and focus on something better that would replace the chiefs. What do we want? We want good health, good housing, education, jobs, security for the future. We want development, we want progress. We want who can negotiate best for us in Ghana. We ourselves, we need a Congress of sorts. We need how would I say, a constitutional way of actually dealing with our problems. We cannot leave it to the so-called royals. They have failed us. They have not been able to give us a chief for so long. So what we are looking for is a mixture of all the people from all walks of life, a Congress to shadow and complement our political leaders. And I say that Gadangme is different because Gadangme can afford to be different, because we are in the capital, because some of our customs are different from the customs of other people. For me, in a new millennium, what you do is that you write a job description. You have the duties. You have a work program. You define relationships. You look at budgets. You define relationship with government. You actually look at a term of office. You actually look at remuneration, and then you decide how the successor will be chosen. Okay. It's difficult for me because when I talk about these things, it's really with some passion. In 1948, we had King Taki coming II. He was distilled in 1962. It took 3 years for Nyamugi to be put on the throne. Okay. There were several candidates over this 3-year period. There was a lot of politicking during that time. Eventually, he emerged as a young man, coincided with the time of politics. If you look at, we came on 65. By 1966, we had a military coup. Right in Accra, soldiers were ruling us with diktats by decree. By 1994, Amobi was not very well enough. Okay, we had no system to replace Nyamugi. What we did was that we appointed an acting president of the traditional council. We did not appoint a regent. So from 1994 till 2002, I think, or 3 or 4, when Nyamugi passed on, was really not very effective. The current traditional council moved on, but really, they did not move on, they could not motivate, they could not communicate properly. And so what happened is that once Amogi passed on, from 2004, the question is, who is Gamanche? Now, I'm saying that as Game, we can afford to be different, and we can come up with something that would work for us in Accra. Okay. We, the people, need to be able to look at the broad representation. And this is really what my idea is about, bringing together a Congress of sorts that would have the broadest representation, but the representation would also be very deep. So let's look at Gadame instead of just looking at Ghana. We have the various clans from Ghana, Usula, Teshino, Atema, Boningo, Pram Pram, Adan, Krobo, Shai, all those places. Okay. We have various voluntary organizations that are operating. Various Asafwe, various Pay, various Kui, or whatever you want to call them. We have people in various professions and vocations. We have farmers, fisher folks, market, women, nurses, teachers, mechanics, engineers, etc., etc. We have youth and women groups. And then we have geographical areas, east, west, north, south. Kedada, Shida, Kagbe, Ubutu. We have all those people. And then we have organizations in the diaspora and various identifiable groups. Now, my issue is that more wealth is made in Accra than in any other place. And I'm talking about foreign exchange. I'm talking about the creation of the GDP. It's all happening. in Accra? Why can't the people of Accra do something that is different? Why can't Ghana people do something that is different so that we have rule in Accra that is effective? That's if we are to, to, to reform. Okay. I have a chart. I don't know how I'm going to show it, but let me try. I should have done this before. And really, this chart is looking at how is it that we can form some sort of, yeah, I can share the screen. That's good. Okay. Yes. Yes. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Sorry, it's coming. Okay. Fit for purpose. 1,000 people meet once a year at the main Congress. 100 General Council meets once a quarter. We have various executive committee, 20 people who meet at AGM. We appoint chairpersons, vice chairs, secretaries, administration, etc. We have people responsible for finance, for publicity, for operations, for personnel. We have various people involved in education, employment, enterprise, community, and everything. But when we have this group, the person then asks me that, what are we going to do with the Ulomo? What are you going to do with Amogiwe and Ajimankesiwe and Takikomewe and Abola Piam and Tekochunuwe and all that? Why should we have only 4 houses in small Abola that decides who should lead Game? Why can't we find the best person that would motivate? What has blue blood or common blood or whatever blood got to do? We don't have a monarch in Ghana that runs the whole of Ghana, but Ghana runs. And what I'm saying is that as Game, we can afford to be different. So I leave you with this chart. It's fairly rudimentary. I think it can be improved, but I'm looking at a discussion around how we run Gadame, how we run Game. I'm not looking for a chief who is an advanced soul, who is going to dictate to the people. I'm looking for an effective person who can look at the education needs, the employment needs, the enterprise needs, the community needs, the health needs, and more importantly, the cultural needs of the Ghanaian people. I end this discussion now. When I delivered this, I almost had brickbats thrown at me because people said that I was, what's the word they use? They thought I was too book long and I was thinking beyond. But the date was 23rd June 2006. We're in November, the year 2020. We still don't know who is Gamanche. Let's think again. Sometimes you get hit with something and then you start thinking, what should we do in terms of improving it? I'm actually not saying that there's no use for a Gamanche. You might get somebody who might come and actually help the people. But I don't know. maybe I need to think again into the future. But I'm telling you that with the deep urbanization in Accra, it's going to be difficult to have an effective Gamanche without a council, a Ga council that advises that person. And that Ga council need not come from the various families. It needs to come from the people. We, the people, then need to get control of the Ga constitution and write it properly. Gami can afford to be different. Tra ni Omanyi Aba. Thank you for listening to me. Okay. And